All right, so for these two labs, labs 13 and 14, we're going to be kind of swapping gears just a little bit. And so in case you didn't get the memo, we're jumping straight to lab 13 and 14. So that way you have time to study for the final without having to worry about doing a lab during finals week. And the big part of all this is I kind of want to, I guess the main purpose of labs 13 and 14 is we really want to show what you can do. Because, yeah, it's great you know how to build a database, but that's just step one of the whole show. So kind of what I wanted to do just a little bit is show you some of my actual projects, and then we're going to jump into lab 13 and 14 where you're going to actually build a big part of one of those, just kind of like a little sample one, and hopefully it gives you a good solid foundation to where you could kind of take it off in any direction that you would choose. So, and hopefully get you to start building some database of your own, because ultimately that's kind of, I think, where it all comes together. Is the first time you say, oh, you know what, I have X that I want to achieve with a project, and then you build your own database and so on and so forth. But I think one of the biggest barriers to doing all that is that we don't know how to do the rest of it. Yeah, now we have the knowledge to build the database, but where do we take it from there? So anyways, I'm going to show you this quick project of mine that I've been working on of my own. And just so you know, there's a lot going on here. Obviously, you don't need to understand it all, but I wanted to show you how a database can really piece a lot of different things together. So what we have is this app, and this is an app for a local news. They do newspaper, radio, all sorts of stuff. And anyways, it actually pulls from WordPress. So all these stories are actually pulling straight from WordPress, which is a database in and of itself. But another problem that they had is they said, okay, we want to be able to show ads on our app, and that's all well and good. It's actually pretty easy to just add an image in an app, but what we wanted is something that's able to be changed without having to resubmit new code. So, for example, right now we have this Star Valley Health ad sitting right here, and we want to be able to change that image whenever we want, right? And furthermore, we want to be able to deliver a lot of different information, like when we click on it, where does it take us? We want it to take us to their website, so on and so forth. And so basically what I had to do is I had to build a database and a full-blown web application so that it could be easily changed, because I'm not expecting normal people to be able to log in and run SQL. So this is actually the live version of the app. I actually have it on my phone right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this ad right here to one of my own temporarily. And so what I did, and for those of you who hung around last week, you actually saw me building the database for the first part of this. So you watched as we created an ad table, an ad placement table. And I can't remember, it was either Jordan or Kyle said, hey, what about an ad size? And guess what? We have an ad size in there as well. So we built all this stuff, and I actually made it so we can actually pull all this data down into the app. So real quick, what we're going to do, so you'll notice that I have placed ads in all my ads. And this radio 1 page, that's the location. So what I did is I created some advertisement locations within the app. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to delete this radio 1 ad from that location, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my own business's one on the radio page. So what you're seeing right here is actually a Flask application. It's a web app, and it's going to, basically, it's our way to interact with this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate away here, and then the next time someone loads up that site, that page on the app, now they're going to see a different advertisement. And furthermore, if they click on it, it's going to take them to the new ad location, and it logs all of it, tracks clicks and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of wanted to show you this because it's really cool, because the database is really the driving force to all this, right? And so what we're going to be doing in our project is going to be very similar Let me just go ahead and throw this back on how it was. We're going to be doing something very similar, except for minus the mobile application. And just to show you that that came back, we're just going to swap back over and boom, everything's back to normal. Just so you know, this application is running on Flutter. So it works on iOS and Android, single code base. Pretty sweet stuff. If you haven't heard of Flutter, I would highly recommend to check it out. But that's enough of that. So anyways, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be building the database and kind of this portion of it. And if you haven't heard of Bootstrap, we're going to be using Bootstrap. And Bootstrap is just kind of a CSS framework that makes it way easier to get a web application up and, well, just web, anything. It doesn't have to be a web application. Because like this button, we didn't have to do any CSS for that. It's already pre-built. So we're going to be using Bootstrap if you've heard of it. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Flask. And Flask is pretty amazing because lots of people use it for an API. And if you don't know what an API is an application programmable interface, if I'm saying that right. But basically what the API does is it's how we deliver data back and forth between our different things. So this is the same website that we use the GUI for, and how we get that information to the app is through this app API. And you can see here that I just built this URL, and it's for the API, and it actually gets the ad number 8, ad ID 8, and it delivers all the stuff. So when you see that ad show up in the application, this is actually where it got that data. It got it from this JSON. And you can see the alt text, the image URL, and the link, the name, and the org name, because that's how we track the data. So anyways, we're going to be doing this right now, actually. So yeah, let's just jump right into it because I think it'll make a lot of sense once we get going. So the first thing we want to do is let's pull up the instructions. So if you go to db.tannercook.com and go to the CIT225 tab, there's this lamp stack with Flask.
Are we doing this in our virtual machine or on our regular machine?
You will be doing it on your regular machine. You technically could do it in your virtual machine, but I didn't want you to mess anything up. And additionally, basically most of the instructions out there on the web for Linux stuff is built for Ubuntu server. And Ubuntu server is the flavor of almost everybody's choice. So that's what I wanted you to see it on. And I also wanted to give you guys a way to do this as if you were actually going to do it professionally. So this is actually when I start to build things, this is the same exact process that I go through. Lots of other people use it too, because what's really nice is we're going to use VirtualBox, and you'll be able to pretty much run a whole development server inside VirtualBox, and it'll be headless, so you won't have all that overhead. So I know lots of you guys complain that it's really slow, and that's because it is. But this will be really fast. In fact, it only takes like 1 gig of RAM. So that's why we're going to do it this way. And just so you know, Lab 13 is part 1, and Lab 14 is part 2. I tried to split up into 2 parts just to kind of make it easy. It actually goes really quick. In fact, we're going to set it up right here, right now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to have VirtualBox, obviously, and we need to have the Ubuntu server. So here's the resources should all be listed here. You'll see that there's VirtualBox, which I already have downloaded, and then the Ubuntu server. Now, for servers, you pretty much always want to stick to the LTS, which means long-term support. And that just means that your server, if you choose not to update it, is going to last a really long time. I think it's 5 years, actually. So you won't have to touch your server for 5 years if you choose not to.
I got a question again.
Yep.
Are we supposed to be going to these sites that you have? Or, so the first, yeah, that db.tannercook.com, are we supposed to be going there?
Yes.
Okay, I just tried to go to the one for lamp stack with Flask, and I got this site can't be reached error.
lamp stack with Flask. Let me post this in there and see if you can grab it.
Can you do that for the other one as well?
Yes. Let me know if you can get there, because the server is local at my house, so it could just be a little thing. Okay. Yeah, we can we'll make sure it all works. But yep, should be working. So you'll get those downloaded, and I've actually already downloaded the Ubuntu server. Just so you know, if you are a torrent person, you can click this alternative downloads and get the torrent. It downloads a lot faster with the torrent, but you want to make sure you get the Ubuntu. We're going to use 2004 just because it's the latest. You could use Ubuntu 1804 if you choose, but I say why not be on the latest and greatest since it's an LTS. So that's what we're going to be doing. And then we're going to set up VirtualBox. So let's open up VirtualBox here. And VirtualBox is just like VMware, but it's free and open source. It's made by Oracle, maintained by Oracle, I guess I should say. So that's what we're going to be doing. And you can actually see that I have quite a few servers here. But we're going to set up a new one. Let's see. We're going to go to Machine New. And I'm going to call this LAMP server. You can call it whatever you want. And it's going to be Linux, and it's going to be Ubuntu 64-bit. And we're going to hit next. And on here, you can leave it at 1,024 megabytes. All we're going to use is one gig for this. It's not going to hurt your computer hardly at all, actually. And on this, we're going to create virtual hard disk. So we're going to say create, and we're going to do. I like to do the VMDKs just because they're universal. But any one of these will work. And I'm going to do dynamically allocated. Did we have a chance to say the size? There it is. All right, and the sizes are all here, so I'm actually going to set this to 15, and because we said it's dynamically allocated, it won't use that much immediately, so no worries there either. So I'm going to say 15 gigs and create. And just so you know, all these instructions are pretty well laid out. I had a lot of students do this last term, and they said it all worked pretty great. So, okay, so now that we have our container set up, if we hit start right now, it's going to tell us we need installation or bootable media. So we're going to skip that right now. We're just going to click on settings, and then we go to storage, and we're going to click where this little disk says empty, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to pretend like there's a little disk here. And so we're going to say choose a disk file. And this is where you'll find wherever you downloaded your ISO, your Ubuntu server. So I like to put mine under my home directory, and I created a directory called images. And so here you can see the file we downloaded, Ubuntu 2004 live server. So I'm going to hit open there, and I'm going to click this checkbox for live CD/DVD. That way it knows that we're booting from it. Then I'm going to hit OK, and let me make sure. One more thing. On that settings tab, we want to go to network, and right now it's attached to NAT, but we want to change that to bridged. And that's going to let us connect to our server from our host machine without actually having to type in the window. So then we're going to go ahead and hit OK, and now we can start it. And once we get this thing started, we will see it boot up. And now we have to play the waiting game. Okay, so while that's going, just to point out again, this does walk through it all. And we're going to be, I'm actually going through the instructions as we go just to double check, but my sound really staticky. Let me see if my gain is up too high. Sometimes it just gets a little weird. There we go. That should be a little bit better. Every once in a while, it just ups the gain all the way. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to be going through our setup here. And this is to install the operating system, our server. And for the most part, you can kind of just hit the defaults here. So we're going to, I am going to update to the new installer. Should be pretty quick. All right, there we go. All right, now we're keyboard configuration. And like I said, we're going to kind of just hit this pretty easy. Now, because we use that bridge adapter, you'll notice that it's actually pulling an IP address right now. So that 10.0.0.62. Yours will be whatever's on your home network. So it might be 192.168.1. Whatever. But that is our IP address. So if you want to, you can take note of that right now because we're going to be using that quite a bit. When we actually build our website, we're actually going to be going to 10.0.0.62. All right, and we're not going to use a proxy. We're going to leave that default. We're going to use the entire disk. So when you're doing this, when you move around, obviously you can't use a mouse. You'll notice that my mouse disappears once it gets in there. So you have to use the arrow keys or you can use tab. I like to use tab, and to mark things, you'll actually hit spacebar. So for example, if I wanted to toggle this X, you can hit spacebar to do so, like that. And then when we're done, I'm just going to tap down to done and hit enter. Leave that default. We're going to hit done and then arrow down. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, we do. All right, and this is where we get to fill out our information. You guys can put whatever you want here. It's just big important thing is that you remember it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name my server dev. It's kind of my go-to name for my development server. So I'm going to call it dev. My username, I always like to just use my full name, all lowercase. And then for my password, you guys can do whatever you want. I'm going to put my password in there. And then we're going to hit done. Now, this is some important bits. If you want to do this, it's going to ask you if you want to install OpenSSH server, and we do. So you want to make sure you hit your little space bar on there, make sure that gets the X, and we're going to leave everything else default and go. Now, this is where we could install more stuff if we wanted to, but we're going to skip all this, and we're going to hit done. And now it's actually going to install the server, and eventually we'll reboot. And like I said, the nice part about this I think is because the original labs, they do a good job of kind of showing you how it could possibly use for an application, but it's kind of using these weird, I guess I shouldn't say weird, these built-in tools. And for the most part, no one in industry actually uses them. I feel like they kind of ship them with the product. So like Oracle has a thing called Apex that you can do, but especially nowadays, I feel like even in the past 5 years, with the way that Python and different things like Angular and all that Node have come along, most people really aren't using those kind of things. So I hope that this is kind of a more modern example, because I actually use this stuff all the time. I have multiple projects that are all using the same tech stack. So what it's going to do is it's going to download and install these security updates. So we just got to kind of wait for it to finish here. We could cancel and reboot, but security is always good, I guess. There shouldn't be too many because we're on 2004, which is the latest. So. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. The other thing that's really nice is, a lot of times, I remember what it's like being a student. You don't really have money to go and drop money on a server or, an Amazon instance or whatever. I recommend, if you do need one, I highly recommend DigitalOcean. You can get a server for $5 a month, but and what's cool is the process will be the same minus the installation part. But what's really cool about this is you can actually, like, if you just want to try out, like say, hey, I got this idea for a web application, you can get it built without spending a dime. And then when you're ready to deploy, then you start spending money. But until you're ready, you don't need to. And additionally, you could even have your computer just stay on all the time and forward your port through your router and technically let your computer do its own thing as a server. In fact, this website right here, whoops, not that one. This one, the db.tannercook.com, is actually running on a computer right behind me in my house. So, and it is taking a little bit longer. Does anyone have any questions so far?
You said all of these instructions are in our module for this week?
No, they'll be on this website because you can choose to either do the existing module or this one. I'll accept both, or either, I guess I should say. So if you want to do the one that's in the module, go ahead, and that's one that you can do inside your existing Fedora. Or if you want kind of like a little bit more of a modern example, you can do these ones. But the instructions to this aren't listed in the course. They're just on the announcement and I guess here and in Teams. All right, looks like we're ready for a reboot. So let's go ahead and reboot. And you'll notice it says that it's trying to unmount the installation medium. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to shut down this server. We're just going to power her off. We're going to go to settings and then just back to storage where we put that one little CD. We're actually just going to eject this CD. So we're going to just say remove disk from virtual drive and then OK. And that just is like ejecting the installation disk from the server. And then once we reboot, we'll actually have our Ubuntu server 2004 up and running for real. So we'll let it finish. And I guess while we're waiting for that to finish, for those of you on Windows, since you guys don't have a SSH client installed by default, you can install the Ubuntu app in Windows. You can install the Ubuntu WSL app, and then you can do it just like I will. It's a terrible, yeah, I think it's right here. You can install Ubuntu. This is what it'll look like. You can install this, and it will let you run the command line just like I'm going to. Macs, you should be able to do it by default as well. Or you can install Putty if you're on Windows. In fact, some of you, if you've taken any computer science classes, have probably already used something like Putty. So you can download Putty to SSH into your computer, or if you want to, you can do it directly from here. So for example, if I click here, I can actually type my login, my password, and log in. But I don't really like to use this because it gets a little weird. And so what's really cool is we can actually take and just minimize this. And I'm going to open up my own terminal here. Let me go to my root directory. So here. And I'm actually going to connect right here. So to connect, I just type SSH, and then I say my username at, and then the URL or the IP address in our case. So mine was 10.0.0.62. And then it's going to ask you if you want to remember the fingerprint. You say yes, and then we log in. And so now I'm actually connected to my virtual machine through my real terminal, which I prefer because it's all color-coded and pretty. And so you can do the same thing. And what's nice is then you can minimize your window and use your computer like it was meant to be made. And that's what we're going to do. Okay, so now we're all connected, and it walks you through all this, just so you know. In fact, we're already past here because that's just to the end of the installer. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back, and we're already on step 2. So step one's pretty easy. Step two is now we're going to install everything we need for our server to work properly. So once we're in here, we can do sudo apt update. And what that does is it basically pulls all the repositories that we need. And then we can say sudo apt upgrade to actually upgrade all of our packages to the latest. So what's really cool is for those of you who've never used Linux so much, you know, on Windows you have to do this whole reboot thingy and you know, schedule time. Same thing on Mac. You know, you get this pop-up and says, hey, you want to update now or later, that sort of thing. Well, on Linux, you can just run that command. They also have a little tool for it, but most people just run the command, and just like this, we're about to be updated just that quick. In fact, let's I'll show you on my actual computer here that we're on. I'm just going to do sudo apt update. I'm going to do the same process, which is really, really nice. We'll see if I have any packages that need to be updated, actually, while this is going. All right, so our server is now updated, and we're just going to wait for this little thing here. So there we go. So I'm going to update my computer while we're on this live stream here. And this updates everything, all your applications and everything. So there we go. Everything on my computer is up to date now. So you can see why people kind of like Linux, especially for servers, because it's so easy. It's just so easy to install things and to update and everything else. In fact, you think it would be kind of hard to have a web server, right? You know, like, oh, I want to run my own website. You know, and most people say, oh, go to like HostGator or GoDaddy or whatever, pay your money. In fact, I remember when I was going to school at BYU, Idaho, I took CIT230, and I remember forking over the money for that that hosting, and I remember thinking, oh, that hurts, you know, just to pay for hosting. Well, you could host this yourself if you knew how, and this is how easy it is. So we're going to install Apache, which is our web server. So I'm going to just say sudo apt install Apache 2. And we're going to hit yes, and it installs Apache. This last little bit takes just a second. And there we go. So now we have Apache. So just that quick, we actually have a web server. So now I can actually, on my browser, my host machine, I'm going to go to 10.0.0.62. And you'll notice that I get this Apache 2 Ubuntu default page. So that means our web server is working. Let's go back here. And so there we go. And this walks you through, if you don't know your IP address, you can just type in IP space address, and it will give you all of your connections. And the most important one is down here. Just look for one that's not a 127 address, because obviously that's our loopback. So you want the one that has broadcast multicast, and it's 10.0.0.62. So that's how you can know your IP address, so you know where to go to test your web server. And that is our Apache setup. And for those of you who want to just, even if you wanted just to start there, we can actually go and edit our config files. So those are located at var www html. So pwd, var www html. That's where we're at. And inside of here, you'll notice that we have this index.html. So then if I go, let's just edit this right here. So I'm going to say nano to edit it, index.html. We have to use sudo nano index.html. And we can actually take and, let's just delete that whole file. So let's just say sudo remove index.html, and we're just going to create a new one. We're going to say touch index.html. And sudo nano. All right, and so those of you who've done HTML before, this is going to look really similar. I'm hoping most have seen HTML before. And I'm just going to real quick, we're just going to real quick just build this little little page here just to make sure it's working. It's called CIT225. And I guess we'll be semantically correct a little bit. All right, so we just built our web page. Let's go ahead and come up here and let's just refresh the page, and boom, there we go. We're saying this is working. And we have our title and everything. So there's our web server that's all ready for us to go. And it's called Apache. So if you'll hear Apache a lot out there in the real world. So we have our web server going, which is a big important part. Now we want to have our database. Now for our database, we're going to use Postgres. And the reason we're going to use Postgres is because instead of Oracle, because you guys have been learning Oracle. But the problem with Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server is that they're expensive and they're difficult to install and set up and configure. Well, Postgres is open source, it's free, and so it's becoming very popular because it is just as powerful as Oracle and it's free. So companies that are startups are all using Postgres because just like we're using it here, there is no risk. We don't have to pay anything for licensing, anything like that. Keeps costs down and everything. So, and it's easy to install. So we're actually going to install this. We're just going to do sudo apt install Postgres Sql and Postgres Sql contrib. And it's going to be 122 megabytes is all, which is actually pretty incredible. All right, and just like that, we have a database, and it's already actually up and running. In a minute, we'll actually start building everything we need to, but for now, just know that it's there. It's up and running. All right, the next thing we need is Python, and Python is a programming language, and many of you are probably seen Python or heard of Python. If not, no big deal. You actually won't have to write any of it really for this. In fact, you won't have to write any Python for this exercise, for these labs. But it is a great platform. It's one of the biggest growing languages out there right now, I think. And it should come pre-installed with Ubuntu. But just to check, if you want to, you can run sudo apt install Python 3. But then we need a couple other things. So we're going to say sudo apt install Python 3-venv. And that's how we build little containers for Python. So we don't have any issues there. And then we're going to install Python 3-pip. And just so you know, these are called packages. Every time I do sudo apt install something, we're just installing a little package from a repository. And what's really cool is all these little packages were made by a large group of people. They're open source, and so you can use them, and they're really pretty neat. And they're all modular like that. We can just install them. All right, and so at this point, we actually have a LAMP stack. And what is the LAMP stack? It's Linux, Apache, and the M traditionally stands for MySQL. It's the database layer, but I like to say model. So Linux, Apache, model, and then P traditionally stands for PHP, but PHP is kind of a dying language. So I like to just say Python now, but really that's kind of our program backend layer. So really you have the operating system, the web server, the database, and your backend language. That's what the LAMP stack is. All right, and so now for those of you who don't want to use the command line as much, that's completely fine. I'm going to show you real quick how you can connect using FTP. So we're going to say sudo apt install vsftpd, and we're going to install it. And you know, it always seems more complicated than what it actually is, but it's just that simple. So then I'm going to use FileZilla to connect here. And I have a lot of these, but I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to connect. You just put in the same stuff you used to connect earlier. So your IP address, your user. I'm going to say okay, and then let's connect to it. And then I'm just going to punch in my password, and I'm going to always allow insecure, and boom, there we go. We're connected to our server here. In fact, we can even go and look at our var www html, and there's our index.html file. So then we could actually say view edit, open this up with the code out of our choice, and go crazy, which we will be doing actually quite a bit. So if you want to use FileZilla or FTP, just go ahead and install it. And that's simple. Any questions up to this point?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, 3 semesters ago, I installed Winamp on my computer, and it came with a database, actually I think 2 databases, and I think Postgres was one of them. Can we use that, or would that not work for the Linux system that we're trying to use?
I'm not quite sure what Winamp is, but yeah, if you want to, you can try it. If you can install, I've never heard of people installing Postgres on Windows.
What Winamp does is it allows you to set up a server locally on your desktop.
Gotcha.
Recommend doing it the way that Brother Cook has it, because you're going to learn a new way to do it, and it's going to help you in the future.
That's true. Okay. Yeah, good point. All right, thank you.
Yep. And the other really cool thing about this is, let's say that I ever wanted to take this server and move it. It's actually super easy. You can just export this whole machine and put it somewhere else. And the other nice thing is, really, if you have any plan to be in IT, especially in any sort of development capacity, whether it's database, data analysis, system administration, anything like that, you're going to want to know Linux. It's everywhere. In fact, our IT department actually has, we've had to do quite a few budget cuts, and we've actually saved jobs by switching to Linux in multiple occasions just since I've been involved, and it's only been 4 years. So it's a really big deal. And everyone, in fact, Azure, if you've heard of Microsoft Azure, Azure is mostly Linux because it's pretty much what everyone uses for their servers. And you'll notice that Ubuntu is listed right here, and that's what we're doing. So like what was said, I really think that you're going to want to try to do it this way. I know it's not fun to run a virtual machine, but trust me, these virtual machines in this capacity are not like Fedora. They're super lightweight, and once you get it set up, it's almost like you're running it native. And it really simulates well, because the same process that I'm using to connect here is actually the same process I use on my production servers. So anyways, let's carry on here. Where did my instructions go? Okay. So let's go back, and now we're already on step 3. So once you get to step 3, we're really to the point where now we're going to start building things. We kind of set up our foundation, and now we're going to start building things. So just so you know, there's some really good resources out here on all this. In fact, like I said, DigitalOcean is kind of my go-to. It's where I have all my servers housed, just because they're priced good. And anyways, they have this whole thing, and not quite exactly how we're going to do it, but good resource there. We're going to be using Flask, which is a web framework that's really nice. And I know this doesn't look flashy, but trust me, people are using it all over. In fact, let's see, who uses Flask? Let's see if there's anyone. The largest site created using Flask. So Pinterest uses Flask. Twilio, LinkedIn uses Flask as its internal stack. So lots of people use Flask. I use Flask everywhere almost. And you'll see why, because it's pretty nice. And then there's a great book. You can find it in the Humble Bundle frequently for a good price. But anyways, so we're going to start building now. So where is our terminal? Okay, so we are going to go to our var www directory. So we can even just say cd var www. And just so you know, for the most part, you should, I think I actually put every command you use in the instructions. So you don't ever have to be worried too much about like, oh, you know, I don't want to do it because I don't know Linux commands that well. They should all be there for the most part. So in fact, I think they all are there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new directory for our application. So I'm going to say sudo mkdir to make a directory, and we're going to call it app. And now we can see it there. And so now we have that app directory. We want to make sure that we own it and that the web server has access to it. So we're going to say cd or sudo chown for change owner. And then you'll put your username. So like in my case, Tanner Crook, and then our group, which is www.data, and then app. And now if we look, we can see that app is owned by me and it's in the www.data group. So now let's go in there, and it's empty. And this is kind of going to be where all of our stuff is at. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make another directory called app. And we're going to go into there. And in here, we're going to build our Flask directories. So we're going to build one called models. We're going to have one called static styles and one called templates. So now if I look in here, I should end up with these directories. In fact, let's just say tree this. Oh. Let's just hurry and tree this so we can see it all. So that's our directory structure for Flask. And then our last little step is we need to create our main application file. And so we're going to say touch app.py. And let's run tree again. And yep, looks pretty good. All right, so Flask, we're gonna build this, and what's really cool is you'll be able to see how fast you can actually build these web applications with Flask. It's actually really addicting. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our app.py so we can actually just get up and going. So in this case, I'm going to say nano app.py. You can also choose to edit it in FTP if you want. So let's do that actually. Let's go over to our FTP. Let's go back to our www. Let's refresh. There's our app. And we are going to view and edit app.py. All right, so now I actually have all of this here for you. So you can actually just copy this, and we're going to paste it in there. We're going to save. Wait for this to come up so we can upload it up. And I got permission denied. So let's .775. Oh, our app.py doesn't have the permission, so let's change this. Okay, let's try that now. And we're still getting permission denied, so let's see what's going on here. Let's we're gonna go ch mod chown -r www. Okay, we need to be sudo to do that. Here we go. I'm gonna just make this all readable right now, just for the sake of getting her in there. All right. Let's refresh here. And now let's try to save. See if we have a config issue somewhere. All right, so we do have one issue here. Maybe we need to change some instructions, but I think I know the issue, so let's just hurry and fix it. So I think what the problem is that our FTP is not set up to let us write. Okay. Right here. So we just want to uncomment that line, and I'll put that in the instructions, so don't worry about it right now. But if you want to do it right now, sudo nano, you'll edit your etc vsftpd.conf file and just change that, and then we just got to restart it. So then we'll just say sudo service vsftpd.conf restart. All right. Now let's see if that was the ticket. I believe it should have been. And there we go. So yep, that was the issue. So I will add that to the instructions so that way it works. Because just one little line change in the config file to make it so it's write enabled. So now that we have that file edited, now we should be all set to set up our Python stuff so we can test it. So what we need to do now is we need to create our Python environment. So we'll want to make sure we're still in our app directory here. And in here, we're going to say Python 3-m, and we're going to create a virtual environment. What that does is it creates this venv file. It stands for virtual environment. And so now what we can do is we can actually activate that by doing source ven bin activate. And now we're kind of in our own little container for Python. So that way when we install things like wheel, it installs it in that one little container and it doesn't affect anything else, which is really important if you want to have multiple things installed. So once we get those two things installed, wheel and Flask, we're all set to test our config. But one more thing we need to do is set up Apache, because with Apache, you can have multiple websites all hosted on the same server. And so we want to make sure that when we go to our server, that we go to our new web application. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set up what's called WSGI. And WSGI is what's going to serve Flask URLs. Basically, it's what takes the Python-y stuff of Flask and makes it into just like a URL for us to look at. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're in the proper directory, var www app, and we're going to create one more called app.wsgi. And then we're going to say nano app.wsgi. And then we are going to put in these little bits of code here. So I'm just going to take, copy, and again, you could use FTP for this if you wanted. I'm just going to do it like this. So there we go. Oh, did I get that right? Let's try that again, make sure. Oh, yep, we got it. It's just a little weird. Okay. All right, so now we have WSGI. So now we just need to, and I think I put it in here again, we're gonna adjust our permissions where I just did that, but we'll do it again just to be safe. So we're gonna adjust the permissions of all of our files. A, so it's secure, and B, so that everything that needs access has it. And now we need to install our little portion for Apache to talk with WSGI. And enable it with A2 nmod WSGI, and it's enabled. All right, so now we're going to actually edit our Apache config file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say sudo nano etc apache2 sites available 00.default. And so what you can actually do is hit Control K and just delete all this. And then I'm actually just going to take and copy it because we already have it right here. And basically what this does, just to kind of go over this, what this is doing is we're saying, look, if someone comes and asks me for anything on port 80, we're going to use this WSGI to deliver our URLs. And we have our directory for different things. If you were doing a normal website, it would look almost the same. The only difference is you wouldn't have this WSGI stuff up here. And there we go. So now our Apache is all configured, and then we can just restart Apache to make our settings take hold. And as long as it restarts correctly, then we should be good. Now, when I go to here now, we'll get it to where it says hello world. And if we go back and look actually at what we put in our app.py file, you'll notice that when we have this route that is the index, the default route, we return hello world. Just to show you kind of what we can do here, let's open up our app.py, discard the local and download a new. Just to show you how easy this is, let's just create a new one. We're going to say app.route, and we're going to say test. Or no, let's say hello. That's a good one because we're going to use test later. And then we just create a function in Python. And so let's just call the function hello. And I'm going to say return hello CIT225. Just like that. So let's save that file. Have it re-upload. And now there is one little caveat you ought to be aware of. Whenever you change something in Flask, you have to restart Apache. So we're going to restart Apache. Come back here. That'll get out of the way. And so we named ours hello. So let's go ahead and type hello. And there we go. We have CIT225. Now, that doesn't seem like too much, but we're going to get really into it in the future. So anyways, that is lab 1. But what I kind of want to do now is I actually want to talk a little bit about, since we have just a little bit of time, I want to talk about actually designing and building the database. Because what's really cool is we're actually going to build the database, and then we're going to we're going to use a Python package, and we're going to have it automatically kind of create all of our Python objects from the database. But before we start doing that, does anyone have any questions? And actually, at this point, that is lab 13. So if you get to this point to where you can see your Flask application, it'll say hello world. You're done with lab 13. So I guess, does anyone have any questions about that before we kind of go on? Because really with this tutorial, I guess you could say, I try not to have it be so much as intensive, like do it on your own, as much as is here. Let's walk through together so you can kind of see how it's done. So just know that what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be talking about what is kind of pre-set up for you for lab 14.
What do we actually turn in?
A screenshot will work. So like if it were me, I would actually just take a screenshot of like that, and that'll work.
That's all that we turn in.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, for lab 13 and 14, really for me, it's just I just hope you try it, really. So, because it is fun, and that seemed like a lot, but I think a lot of it's just because I was just jabbering on. The instructions should walk you just step by step, and it does explain it as you go. So hopefully. Because even my first times, even me still, sometimes I have to come and refer back to my own notes a little bit. Just I like the workflow, and so no worries if it's like, whoa, this is like something that I'm not going to learn. Don't commit it to memory right now. I just kind of want to more, because once you have it set up once, then you can develop on it for quite some time. So
You're going to post this whole video, right?
yep, it'll be there, and the one, and they're already in the announcement, and on Teams there should have been one from last semester as well, that has it as well. So you should get double dose. So like if immediately after this, if you have time and you want to start, go watch that video. It should be almost identical. The only difference is in that video it's pretty much straight through the instructions. In fact, I might do a better job of explaining what things are doing in that video. I was trying to go a little faster this time because I'm hoping to get to talk about, because in those ones I didn't actually ever talk about the database. It's more just like, here, I've already created the database for you. But I really kind of want to go over, oh, hey, this is our business scenario. How do we build this database? So this video will be a little different in that regard, but if you want,
and you'll have the corrections made.
Yep. The FTP is the only correction that'll have to be made there. So, yep. In fact, any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
I'm having difficulty connecting the VM to my wireless.
Can you say that again? Sorry, it's just really quiet. I had to turn you up.
Okay, I said I'm having difficulty having the VM connect to my wireless. I followed the instructions, change the bridge adapter, select my wireless network name, but it's not in my network, so I cannot download the update. I cannot download the Apache.
Okay. And the one vital part, I think, and you did change in the virtual machine, you changed the network to bridged instead of NAT, correct?
Yes, I changed it to bridge.
Okay. Usually that works. If that doesn't work, I would try making sure your Windows firewall isn't doing anything. You can try turning it off if you're on Windows. That's really the only thing I can think of. Yeah.
So I'll try to get my Windows firewall, check my Windows firewall and see maybe if it's contributing to it.
Yeah, give that a shot, because usually it should work. If that doesn't work, the other thing you might try is I think on there's a VirtualBox extension pack, and I don't know if it has anything to do with it. But if you go to VirtualBox's website, there's this VirtualBox 6110 Oracle VM VirtualBox extension pack. You can install that and see if that makes any difference as well. And make sure, and maybe after you do all that, reboot your actual host machine, because maybe something's just gummed up too. So.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right. So, so really that part is all right there. And actually, I guess to further, because I could actually, if we wanted to, I could actually just shoot this virtual machine at this point out to everybody. But then it would be like a 1 gig. It would be a little bit bigger download, but we could do it. But I think it's really important because a big part of it, especially in today's job market, I think it's, if you have, and I think someone already messaged me this term about how they interviewed for a job and the Linux experience kind of came up, and it was a good thing. But Linux experience, I think, is going to be a must-have pretty much everywhere. So I think you're going to really want that as you start getting out there. And knowing how to set up and configure a server is huge. You'll be a long ways away in front of people who don't. But now to get into, I guess, how this applies to the classes, I kind of wanted to talk about setting up our database just a little bit. So I actually have the database kind of all created in a script for us, but I kind of wanted to go over it and talk about our business scenario and what we're going to be doing. So in our scenario, what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to build a little course catalog thing. In fact, let's see if I have a picture somewhere. Okay, maybe I don't have a picture somewhere. But we're going to be setting up a course catalog that's basically just going to let us list courses in our database. And I just did that because it was kind of like an easy to understand kind of scenario. So what we're going to be doing is we need to set up Postgres first, because that's kind of what we're going to build on. And I kind of want to build it. I like to use an IDE, and you guys can all install this IDE if you want. It's called dbeaver. Because the other nice thing about this is once you have it installed, once you have it set up this way, you'll actually be able to connect from your host computer like you always have. So let me just clean up this. So this is what we're going to be doing. This is dbeaver. And this is where I'll run my commands. But first things first, I got to set up, and this is part of Lab 14, so we'll cover this next week. But since we're on this server, I've got to do it real quick. So I just got to set up a user on our database. And so to do that, we use this nice little user that's here for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a database. So I'm going to say create DB, and I'm going to call it course_catalog. And let's go back here. There we go. Course_catalog. And then I'm going to create a user called catalog app. And I know that sounds a little weird, but the catalog application is our user. And then I'm going to log in. So just like on Oracle, we use SQL Plus, right? Well, Postgres uses a similar application, but it's called PSQL. And then once we connect, you'll notice it kind of looks it's different, but it's still kind of the same thing. And then we say /connect, and we're going to connect to our database, course catalog. So we're now connected. And now we're going to give our user catalog app a password. So we're going to say alter user catalog app with password, and then we're going to give it a password. So I'm going to say school rocks. And then we're going to give that user access to the database. We're going to give it everything. So grant all privileges on database, course catalog to the catalog app user. All right. So once we've done that, now we want to check to make sure we have access. Now, in the instructions, just so I'm following along with the instructions, we're actually going to get a little bit of an error here, and that's on purpose. So let's quit. Type the wrong thing. There we go. All right, so let's try to connect pSQL course catalog, and we want to connect with catalog app. And you'll notice that it says peer authentication failed, because there is one thing we need to change, and that is our stuff here, so we can log in. So we're going to edit Postgres Sql. This is just another config file that we have to change. Oh, and we're in one more change, I guess, because it updated. So we're going to change this. So real quick, I'm actually going to hurry and do that while we're here before I forget. There we go. Simple as that. Okay, now we're going to change our line down here. And where it says local is for Unix socket connections only. We're going to go over here to where it says peer. And we're going to change it to MD5. And that basically lets us use our password to connect. And then once we do that, we can restart. Anytime you make a config change, you've got to either reload it, depending on what it is, or restart it. I just like to restart it. Reload, I guess, would be better if it was production, but since we're not going to worry about it. Then we're going to try logging in again, and this time we'll get a password prompt, and so I say school rocks, and we're logged in. Then to exit, just /Q. So now that we have a user and we tested to make sure it works, we're actually going to connect. But one thing real quick, let's see if it's I'm just going to real quick, I can't remember if Postgres has a way to make it so we can I think we can change the all right, so this is one more thing that we need to change if you want to connect from outside. So I think we just change this to 0.0.0.0. All right, let's try now. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to connect right from here. So I'm just going to create a new connection. We're going to use Postgres. Our host is going to be 10.0.0.62. Our database, we're going to connect to catalog or course catalog. Our username is catalog app. And our password was school rocks. Let's go ahead and test. So where's one more thing we need to change? Because it's expecting us to have that. So let's go here. This is the tightness of Linux security. So I will put this in there as well. Because actually the instructions, we don't ever connect with dbeaver, but I'll put a little thing in there to say if you want to connect from an external source, you can. You just have to do this. Because all we have to do is we just have to edit our file again. Because see, we changed the one for local connections, which means that from localhost. But we want to make it so it works for anybody over IPv4. So you'll notice right down here, this is for local socket connections only. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and add a new line, and we're going to say any something like that, I think. Like I said, sometimes we just got to look it up. Postgres, allow remote connection. Okay. Instead of any, it's all. This is for IPv4. If you want to do IPv6, you'd have to do one ::0/0 if you wanted to. All right. And one more thing we need to change that I think we didn't do correctly. It's down here. We want to change this 0.0.0. I think that's a MySQL thing. And we're going to listen on asterisk. There we go. Okay, now let's restart and test. And there we go. We're connected. So I'll make sure to put those in there too. I'll do that right after this. All right. And now we're connected. We have access to all of our stuff. So let's just go ahead and open a SQL editor here. There we go. And now we can run our commands. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to build a table for all of our stuff. And I kind of like to start all the time with our system user table. And just so you know, we're going to kind of pull it from here, but we're kind of going to go so you can kind of see the difference. So the first thing we want is our system user table. So we're going to say create table. We're going to say system user. And this is where you'll really notice that things look almost the same. So we create table system user. We're going to have the system user, I believe it's ID, system user ID. And we're going to give it a serial data type. Like I said, there will be some minor differences, and I'm just going to look at our stuff here. We're going to give them an email. We're going to give them a first name. It's very similar to what we have in our database. Last name. Password. We're going to let people have really complex passwords, and a salt. And the salt is so we can hash that password. And then we need to give our primary key. So just like you've seen before, we're going to say system user PK primary key. We're going to build that on system user ID. And then we can actually just run this. Boom. And now we can say select everything from system user. And we have a system user table. In fact, we can even come over here and say refresh. And now if we go in here, we can actually see our system user table. And we can see that it's actually using 16 kilobytes, which isn't very much, but it's there. So then we'll go through and build our tables. So now this is kind of where we want to get a little bit into our business logic. So we're building a course catalog, just like what you have at BYU Idaho, right? We have a course catalog. And just to kind of, I guess, go over design a little bit, the way that this is kind of designed by default is we have a catalog year. So, you know, courses change from year to year. Sometimes they're offered, sometimes they're not, and all that kind of stuff. So basically, we're going to organize everything pretty much. We're going to organize all of our courses by a catalog year. So for the sake of saving some time, I'm going to take and copy this just so we can see it. And so what we're doing is we have our catalog year, and we have a name, obviously, an end year, and whether it's active or not. So for example, the end year would be, like, for example, if we were talking about BYU Idaho, the end year would probably be like 2021, because that's when their school year kind of ends. You know, they cycle through, and they end on 2021. So let's actually build one for this year. So we're going to say 20-21 is the name. It's 2021, and its active is a 1. So let's go ahead and run our thing to build our table and our insert statement. Let's check, select everything from catalog year. And there we go. So that's kind of how we're going to organize everything, is into a catalog year. And then let's say, guys, kind of in this example, I kind of built it more for my world where there's multiple schools. So let's say, you know, someone like BYU Idaho probably wouldn't have it, but maybe you do your school as departments. So like the School of Business, the School of whatever. But in this case, we're kind of going to just use like high school type stuff. So, and again, it's something that everybody understands. So a school has a number, a name, abbreviation, and whether it's active or not. And then let's go ahead and build Shire High School. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, so that's where the names come from. There's our school. So now we can say select everything from school. Check it out, and there we go. Now, so now we kind of have two parent tables, and in fact, let's refresh this, because one of the cool things about dbeaver that I really like is we can actually build a diagram right in here. So I'm going to say File, and I'm going to go to where is it? New, and we're going to do an ER diagram, which is a relationship diagram, and we're going to do it for the course catalog. You know, let's use all these. And we're going to call it, we'll just call it test. So let's finish. So you'll see that right now, none of these are connected because we have our base table, our system user table is kind of there all by its lonesome. And then we have a catalog year and we have a school. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. We have kind of 3 parent tables, but we're gonna add to that here in just a minute. So then I guess we're going to add more. Credit type is obviously a big deal, and credit types are kind of like our common lookup type stuff where it's kind of holding metadata, if you will. But in this case, we're giving it its own table. So we are going to add quite a bit of credit types. So we have math, English, science, social studies, vocation, fine art, physical science, and electives. All right, so now we're going to start getting into where we're going to tie some stuff together. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to try to move a little quicker because we are running out of time just a little bit. So we're going to create a catalog table because we have our school year, we have our catalog year, and we have our school. But then we actually need catalogs because maybe a school wants to have multiple catalogs in a given year. Maybe they have a draft catalog and then a final catalog, so on and so forth, different iterations. And so real quick, let's refresh our database here, and let's actually do file new, and we're actually going to see how our stuff has changed. Just go ahead and select everything here. Because now you'll notice that we have some connections. So catalog year and school were kind of our parent tables. And now we have a catalog that is dependent upon school and our catalog year. And that is because our catalog has this foreign key constraint that points to school and catalog year. And this is the same syntax that's used in Oracle. So that should look pretty familiar. So you can see how these are connected there based on our school year and our catalog year ID. So those are all connected. And then we still have this credit type over here, but we're going to we're gonna add some more to that here in just a minute. So let's keep plugging along. And then our course table. So we create the course table and then we add a course. And so if we select everything from course, we just have one little course in there, CS 101. Let's go file new, and we can see how the whole picture kind of goes together. I didn't refresh. All right, so this is kind of our whole design here. So we have up at the top, we have our school and our catalog year, which are kind of parents. And they have catalog that's dependent upon them. And then inside of a catalog, we have courses, and a course is tied to a credit type. So you can kind of see that as you build this, you kind of need a way to, you kind of have to think through it just a little bit. And I like to always kind of start at the most foundation level, which in our case was a catalog year. You know, how are we going to track catalogs from historically? Well, we need catalog years. And then, okay, we have a catalog. Well, how are we going to track catalogs amongst various schools? Okay, well, we add a school table and we tie catalog to school. We have our catalog, and then inside of those catalogs are our courses, and then a course has a credit type. So it's a really basic example, which I kind of like, because sometimes I feel like our database gets really complicated really quickly. So what I ask, because obviously you don't need to do this all because it's already there for you. In fact, the instructions reference this file. I would just encourage you to go try it out. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could even try building your own table. There's lots of different things you can do. Postgres is pretty awesome, and it uses almost the same syntax. The only difference you'll notice are data types. So you'll notice that instead of number, I'm using int. And the serial, actually, what the serial does is kind of neat. It's a little old though, but you can use serial. It actually auto increments for us, because you'll notice when I'm doing the inserts, I'm not actually inserting into the primary key column, just like MySQL. So that's what I like about Postgres, is it's kind of like Oracle power mixed with MySQL ease in many ways.
We can add multiple constraints onto the same line, can't we?
Yes, you can. In Postgres, you can add multiple constraints on the same lines.
And is this part of this week's assignment or next week's assignment, or where does this fall?
It's part of next week's.
Okay.
If you follow the instructions, it'll be there. And in fact, I'll post. If you follow, since you watched this, what I would recommend is follow last semester's video if you want kind of more just like a guide through the instructions, because they'll probably be a little better last term. But the instructions actually should take you through pretty good. So if you don't want to watch any video, you can do that. But this part here, and actually all this, you actually don't have to do any of this. I kind of ran it manually because I wanted you to see it. But when we actually get to it, you'll actually just run that file from the command line, and it'll just do it for you. So if you're just following the instructions, you actually don't have to worry about it at all. You'll download the file, and then you'll run it, and it'll create everything for you. But I do have a little disclaimer in there because, the big part of this is the database, and it is important to understand your database design. So that's why I put that little disclaimer in there, because hopefully you run it, but you also take a look at it. Because even me, when I set up something, a lot of times I have to acquaint myself with the database, and the best way to do that is just to go look at the tables themselves. So, good question. All right, and I will probably leave it at there for now. I will make sure to make the changes here so you can connect externally, and as well as the FTP changes. So those will be in there probably by the time you go to follow the instructions, so no worries there. Next week we will talk about, we'll actually start building, and I really wanted to get through a lot of this so that next week we could talk more about the fun part, which is building it. Because I'm kind of hoping to teach you a little bit more about the Flask side of things, so that because realistically what you could do is you could build your own database, run one command, put the new file in, and take off building your own design. So if you have any ideas, because maybe there will be some extra time tomorrow, if there's like a little simple project that you've been thinking about, just let me know. And maybe we can build a little bit of it right then and there. So, but anyways, thanks for hanging in there with me this long. We're actually right on time. We're 4 minutes over. But does anyone have any questions? Like I said, we kind of went really fast this week, but hopefully it wasn't too much.
I've just got a question on a snag I hit right at the end.
Okay.
I was doing the sudo service Apache 2 restart.
Uh-huh.
And I get, what's it say? Job for Apache 2 service failed because the control process exited with error code. See system control status Apache 2.service.
Okay, so usually what that means is that there's something wrong with the config file. So my bet is that something probably just didn't copyright. So yeah, it should. Once you paste that in there, because most time if it doesn't start, it's just because that config file has an error in it somewhere that's not able to parse.
Okay.
Yep. Let's see. So Sunday, I'm afraid that an already configured server probably won't help with that, because it sounds like a network thing. Really, there could be two choke points. It could be the virtual machine doesn't have DHCP. It's not pulling off DHCP, which if it's not pulling off DHCP, one thing that I would recommend is if you didn't have it set to bridged before you did the install, there can be some hiccups there because it'll try to pull a different IP address, which it should be kind of rare. We can restart let's see, Ubuntu. There should be a command we can run right there. So if you run this command, it should force it to get a new address. And if this doesn't work, if that doesn't work, then that means that the issue is most likely somewhere in VirtualBox and Windows. And those ones are harder, unfortunately, to diagnose. Linux is actually usually pretty easy. We can find out what's wrong with Linux pretty quick. But yeah, so if that doesn't work, I'm trying to think. On Mac, just as a disclaimer, I guess, on Mac, you may have to go into settings and privacy and enable all their little checks. I really dislike what Mac OS has done. And in the future, you actually won't even have a choice because they're switching to ARM processors, so you won't even be able to do this on a future Mac. But I'm trying to think if there's anything on Windows like that, the settings. And I can Google it just a little bit and see. If you're not able to connect wireless, the big thing is make sure that one of the biggest things is if you can, make sure you have it's set to bridged before you try to run the install. As long as you follow the instructions, it should take you in that direction. If you do that and it still doesn't connect, like I said, that usually means that there's something not working right with VirtualBox. And we can let's see. And here's a nice little post. And you can try changing some settings. Anyway, so if you just do a couple Google searches, it'll probably take you in the right direction. My guess is that most likely it's somewhere in VirtualBox and Windows area that it's having some issues. And like it says, some wireless adapters don't work depending on your model. Who knows? If you're not on the latest VirtualBox, maybe that sounds like maybe that's not it. Yeah, that might have a couple fixes there for you. But anyways, does anyone else have any other questions? Shoot me a message on Teams if you run into any issues. But does anyone else have any questions, concerns? Yeah, it's that typical IT answer. If you try turning it off and on again, a refresh install, sometimes that's just all it takes, and the world will never know why. But, all right, well, if there's no other questions, I'm going to let you guys go. Hopefully this is fun. And like I said, don't stress too much about it. Like I said, we can get things solved really quickly. So if you run into any hiccup at all, shoot a message because it should be pretty foolproof, but sometimes things happen. So if you run into any issues, just shoot me a message. I can probably answer it like really fast. But anyways, yeah, thanks for coming and have a great week.